Hello and welcome to episode 13 of JDUB and Friends. Had a failed recording, so this is the second try of this. So welcome back to Saigan again. Gonna be talking about some D&D tonight, and hopefully everything goes smooth. If not, you'll be seeing this on Twitch here in a little bit, so we'll see what happens. I was asking some questions when it broke, so we're just gonna start with the questions. What's your favorite tabletop game?
My favorite tabletop game, um, not necessarily the best one, but my personal favorite for a number of reasons I'll probably get into later, is
Hmm.
Basic Fantasy RPG.
Okay. Yeah, I've never heard of it. So I've heard of a few of them, but never that one. So something different, I guess. Um, Now when you're playing a tabletop RPG, do you like being the DM better or the player better? And I believe the last time we said it was a dungeon master.
It's dungeon excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. Yeah, in Dungeons and Dragons, it's referred to as a dungeon master. You go back far enough, they were called referees. Different games call them different things. Storyteller, keeper, some other ones that don't come to mind anymore, but I named them earlier and I should be commended for
Yeah, yeah,
that.
we were doing pretty good earlier, and then all of a sudden my laptop's like, nope, I'm dying.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the tragedy of trying to create content.
Yeah.
But yeah, I normally prefer being a dungeon master, although there are a couple of just stellar dungeon masters that I know that I'm always happy to jump at being a player in one of their games. But
Yeah.
yeah, 9 out of 10 times I'm a forever DM.
Now there are some like very well known, very big tabletop games. Is there one that you say would be very underrated?
The one that I just named. um, I feel like Call of Cthulhu doesn't get
Okay.
near enough attention here in the West, which is it's weird. It's weird to me because like it ticks all the boxes for something that would be great here.
Hmm.
Its primary setting is in like the Roaring 20s, which I mean, there's a lot of history in that time, a lot of music, a lot of social and political issues to create plenty of drama. And then with that, you throw in weird sci-fi horror from like H.P. Lovecraft and Chambers
Hmm.
and other writers who I can't remember off the top of my mind. Everybody has heard of Lovecraft. That's
Yeah.
that's the big one that Call of Cthulhu kind of revolves around.
Now, didn't that get made into a video game at one point?
It has had a number of video games and other tabletop board games, not just role playing games. But
Okay.
yeah, the so a lot of Lovecraft's work is public domain
Hmm.
at this point. So anybody can come along and write a story using a lot of characters and deities and entities from Lovecraft's fiction. And it was, even at the time, it was kind of a very early shared universe. We're talking late 1800s, early 1900s, a bunch of different sci-fi authors kind of all bouncing off of each other's work
Hmm.
and creating this bizarre shared universe.
Hmm. Yeah, I that's the once you name that, I've seen some people I watch on YouTube that they have their own vlog, and that's one of the games they play continuously. That and
Mhm.
oh, what's another one? There's one that has to deal with getting I'm gonna say it's weird, but like wood and like a bunch of other stuff. I forget the name of it, but a lot of people talk about it. It's one of those kind of unknown tabletop games. But
Catan?
yep,
Settlers of Catan?
that's the
Okay.
one. Yep, yep. I figured I was like, you would know. Um,
Like, wood. There's one game that I can think of where
yeah,
wood is a meme, and it's Catan.
yeah, yeah. That's why I was like, I know I've seen people play it. And I'm like, oh, that kind of seems like a cool idea. Sounds like Goose in the background, huh?
It is Goose.
Yeah.
It's, half an hour before it's time for him to get fed, and he wants me to not forget, and for
Aw.
that, he's gonna wait extra long.
Yeah. Uh, Now you said what your favorite is, and then most are underrated. But what do you say is the worst tabletop game that's ever been created?
Oh, the worst tabletop game that's ever been created. Are we including board games in this, or are we speaking strictly tabletop RPGs?
Uh, we'll do both.
Okay. Um, oh, what's it called? What's it called? So board game wise, war game wise, it's oh man, it's like the War for North Africa or something. It is this ridiculous war game scenario. You can buy this game. If you and 12 friends got together
Hmm.
and played this game for like 10 hours a week,
Hmm.
you would not be done with it in 10 years. It
No.
is so granular
Hmm.
and specific. It's I it focuses so much on the
Hmm.
details to the point where the British military expends, I think it was gasoline faster than the American military because of the difference in their jerry cans. It's that
Oh.
level of granularity, and part of me admires that it exists,
Hmm.
and then the other part of me wants to know why.
Makes sense. Yeah.
As far as tabletop RPGs are concerned, that's really hard to just pick out a strictly bad one.
Hmm.
Um, I don't think I've played a tabletop RPG that's just bad.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that's because so much of uh so much of the hobby, tabletop RPGs, so much of the experience is going to be based on the people you play it with,
Hmm.
um, the DM's interpretation of the rules, and the kind of game that the players are looking for, and whether or not there's cohesion among the players in the kind of game that they've had. I have had poor experiences in RPGs before,
Hmm.
but usually that's either because there's like just a really disruptive player, um, B, a DM who just wants to monologue instead of setting the scene, um, or C, it's just not the kind of game that I wanna play in. And
Hmm.
that's happened to me recently where, like, the kind of game I was hoping to play was very different from the kind of game that the other players were wanting to play, and at that point, I was like, "I'm gonna bow out.
Hmm.
This is nobody's fault. They just have a different idea of what a fun RPG is
Right.
from me." So there's a lot of cohesion that needs to happen for a great group.
Hmm.
Usually you can have a good group with some level of cohesion, but I don't think I've ever actually sat down and tried to play a game that had a bad system. I'm sure they're out there, but
Wouldn't surprise me.
I've read rule books that I didn't like as tabletop RPGs.
Hmm.
Um, Dungeons and Dragons 4th edition comes to mind, and it's not because it was a bad system,
Hmm.
it's because it was trying to be something else.
Yeah.
It was written to be like a tabletop MMO. It was
Hmm.
very much an MMO. All of the abilities had cooldowns, and you had skill trees, and I was like, I can play WoW.
Yeah. True.
Why do this when I can do this?
Yeah. Speaking of WoW, what do you think is, let's say, best tabletop games that have been made into video games?
Oh, well, very recently, Dungeons& and Dragons got, Baldur's Gate 3,
Yeah.
which wow! Fantastic game.
Hmm.
Um, Call of Cthulhu has definitely had some fantastic video games and some not fantastic video games. Um, that's what happens when you have, so much artistic license with a, um what's the phrase I used earlier to describe it, where nobody really owns it? Not Creative
uh,
Commons, that's something else.
uh,
Anybody can kind of use Cthulhu
oh,
to make
yeah.
a game.
Yeah. I know what I forget now. Yeah. Free.
It's late in the day. I've been sick and I do not remember, but
Yeah.
I said it earlier. Just rewind.
Yeah. Free use or whatever it's called. Yeah.
Close. That's not it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of around the same time. Yeah. The main one that I know of that I've always wanted to try because I got a lot of people might not have watched people play it is Vampire the Masquerade because I know that started as a
Mm,
tabletop
mhm.
and then it got brought to the PC and
Yep.
had two games are really good or well I've heard two games are really good and the other two were kind of eh.
It's had a couple of games. I never actually played the RPG. I played a couple of the action
Hmm.
RPGs that were based on it, the Hunter games.
Yeah.
Those are based on Vampire, and I enjoyed some of those.
Hmm. Yeah, I seen what they came out or the Vampire the Masquerade 2 or something like that, and not many people enjoyed that because it's more of a PvP type thing, I guess, or something like that for this next generation of consoles.
I I feel like that got canceled.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's been a lot of drama regarding Vampire the Masquerade. That's an entire video on its own, and I don't know enough about the subject to speak on it well.
Yeah. Yeah, the only reason I knew it because Bender Rodriguez is in one it's one of the characters in it, so it's weird. But yeah, tonight we are going to talk about some D&D, other uh tabletop games. Now, what are some this will be kind of the second segment we're gonna get into, but what is some of the basics of tabletop games or basics of D&D?
So the basics of D&D, really all tabletop RPGs, not all. There's some variance in here,
Hmm.
but you typically have somebody who's a referee slash storyteller, the game master, the dungeon master, and they are the ones who act as an engine for
Hmm.
the game. They set the scene, they tell you where you are, they tell you what you see, they provide you with the challenge, the encounter,
Okay.
the reason that you're playing. And based on your decisions and based on their interpretation of the rules, they give you that feedback. Now, a lot of times, um, we all have a chance of failure and a chance of succeeding at anything we try and do. And sometimes it's as simple as, just walking down the hall. Um, I'm sure you've met at least one person or are somebody who fails spectacularly at that sometimes and just
Hmm.
trips for no reason at all.
Yep.
Um, Most DMs are not going to make you roll for walking down a hall, but you usually have ability scores that
Hmm.
are related to different tasks. And then you have to do some kind of a check to see if you've succeeded at a task and how well you've succeeded or how poorly you've failed. And how that works from game to game is really a system thing,
Hmm.
but they all kind of share that. And usually that's determined with rolling dice, using your scores as a modifier to find out what number that you need to be successful. And sometimes it's like searching the room for clues or trying to shoot an arrow into the head of a goblin.
Hmm.
So that's the standard um game system at play. Dice for random number generation to check for success at something that you're trying to do. But what really makes tabletop RPGs shine is the social aspect.
Mm,
It is a form of group storytelling where everyone around the table takes on one or more characters. The single character to each player is kind of a relatively new thing. Back in the day, that makes me sound old. It was fairly common for people to run like 3 or 4 characters, sometimes even more
mm,
at a time. Um, and the level at which you can get into this storytelling and the play acting and doing voices is totally up to the players and totally up to what they're comfortable with.
mm,
If you've watched a lot of D&D podcasts, something like the games that Matt Mercer or Brendan Lee Mulligan run, um, they do a lot of voices. They dress up in costumes. They're
mhm,
very there's a lot of flavor in how they run their games. And I've played in some games with people like that. I'm not that kind of DM. I think the best DMs are the ones that just kind of find their own style.
mhm.
And I have my own style. I've been working on it since I was 12. It's a craft that you build and you hone and you try out new things and you throw out the stuff that doesn't work.
Mm,
But um, the thing that brings it all together is that group storytelling. I find we're having the most amount of fun during a discussion
mhm,
where everyone is kind of playing off of each other. And there's this wonderful scene that's forming, and the DM gets to sit back and watch the story that the players are creating
mhm.
instead of a story that is being fed to them. That
Okay.
is when it gets fantastic. And that's something that is relevant across the entire hobby.
Mhm. Yeah, the only reason I actually started learning about D&D was in the last maybe 2 years. I actually
Mhm.
one of the people I kind of stumbled on him, Matthew Lillard, Hollywood actor from Michigan.
Yeah, I love Matthew Lillard. He was
Yep,
Shaggy in Scooby Doo. He was fantastic in SLC Punk. I
yep,
also recently found out he's a big Dungeons and Dragons nerd.
yep. That's exact. Yeah, it was all of a
Yeah,
sudden I was looking through something and I ended up on the dungeon. I think I followed him on Twitter, and he was saying something about he was going live on Twitch with some of his friends to play some D&D. I was like, what? And then kind
yeah,
of watched that and got kind of following up on it.
yeah.
Like, this is cool.
Living the dream. Like,
Yep,
it got to be a great actor,
yep,
fantastic actor, and then, retired to write D&D supplements
hmm,
and play with his friends, and
yep,
that's just oh, I'm jealous. I'm jealous. But
yeah,
he
right,
also seems like a really chill guy, so,
yeah,
more power to him.
very down to earth. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
By the way, speaking of Matthew Lillard, if people that watch this have never seen, oh my goodness, why can't I think of the movie now? I just went totally left my brain. I was thinking about it and then just left. Um,
Which which one was it?
had
Describe it.
Angelina Jolie, one of her first movies, Hackers.
Hackers.
Yep,
That's right, he is in Hackers.
he
He's the
is.
guy with the long hair. I
Yep,
keep forgetting he's in that. Yeah,
yep.
no, he's great in that too.
Great movie. I mean, it's one of those 80s,
Oh,
early 90s movies, but
it is full 90s, and
hmm,
what's incredible about that movie is how much it gets wrong, and at the same time, how much it gets right.
hmm,
Like, all the tech stuff, most of it is wrong, but the
yeah,
social engineering aspect of it, they did that really well. It's like somebody wrote that screenplay who
hmm,
really understood the subject,
yeah,
and then the producers were like, we have to sex this up.
yep,
And you get this hilarious, it's almost the perfect 90s movie.
hmm,
Like, if the kids ever ask me, what was it like to live in the 90s? I'm going to show them Hackers and offer no explanation.
yep. Yep, definitely. Yeah, we have no names, no names. Oh, I love it. Yeah, Matthew Lillard's great.
They're trashing the planet.
Yeah, yeah, he was. Yeah, like I said, he was one of the first people that got me into that. Watched a little bit of Vampire the Masquerades, watched people play that, but
Mhm, mhm.
you know, I know you were, I was talking in your Discord about all that stuff, and I was like, all right, this is gonna be kind of, it's a lot to learn, but stuff like that, it's kind of cool learning it. Now,
It's an entire hobby on
yeah,
its own.
yeah, I've heard it's really time consuming to kind of get start once you're, figuring stuff out. It's kind of like,
It it can be. It depends on the level that you wanna play it at, how
hmm
often you wanna play, and really how into it you are. There
hmm
are some groups who only meet, like, yearly,
hmm
but they'll meet at a convention, and it'll be like a weekend-long live action role play, and they all have costumes, and they've been keeping in touch with each other, and it's the only time during the year that they get to meet up. So they have this epic 3-day long session, and
yeah.
then, other groups get together for a couple of hours each week.
Mm.
So it really just depends on the group that you find, what kind of game you're looking for. Um, there's no book on how you have
hmm
to run your group. There are rule books on how to play the game, but there's
hmm
nothing that really says like, you have to do sessions like this, and it has to be separated into acts like this. And it's really it's there's a lot of uh creativity that lies in the hands of the players.
So like, let's say you only had a couple hours, you could definitely streamline the game a little bit then, right?
Yeah, you could streamline the game. Some systems work better
hmm
for shorter play sessions. That's Gonna talk about that more later. And then other systems might work better with longer play sessions.
hmm
Some systems you can build a character in 5 minutes and be playing very quickly. Other systems,
Oh, that's thing heavy.
yeah, other systems you can spend 5 hours with your group building characters, and then you're still not done. So there's there's various levels of crunchiness to the rules
hmm
depending on what you want to play.
Okay. Yeah, I've definitely been kind of interested. Like, like I said, we're gonna try when he is available, kind of set
Mhm.
up a, you know, tabletop thing and do a stream kind of with it too, so you all can
Yep.
see what I'm seeing.
Y'all will be welcome to join.
Mm,
I want to kind of split the group down the middle. Ideally, have 8 people for what I'm planning, with 4 people being from the previous group and like 4 people who haven't really played before, including yourself.
yeah.
And then you get a nice mix of people who are comfortable with it.
hmm
And that kind of helps new players get drawn into it.
It
I
makes
have a
total
system. I've been doing this for too long.
sense. Understandable. Yeah, yeah, I definitely that's something I definitely want to learn. But if I am trying to learn, what are some things that beginners definitely need to understand about D&D or tabletop RPGs or tabletops in general?
So the most important thing that you need to know
Hmm.
is is that there's other games aside from Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay.
I'm half joking. That's just a jab at Dungeons and Dragons and how popular it is. It's a fine system. I don't actually have a problem with Dungeons and Dragons. I just
Okay.
like to make fun of it. The big thing is um and Gary Gygax, who was one of the creators of the original edition of Dungeons and Dragons, famously said, and I'm going to mess up this quote, but he essentially said that one day people were going to figure out that they don't need rule books to play the game.
Mm.
So everything that's in these rule books, be it
hmm
here, be it here, what really matters is how the group wants to play.
Mhm.
Um, if you're going to stick to the rules and they don't make sense for your group, then you're not going to have a good time.
Okay.
So, and this is where being an experienced dungeon master kind of comes in, and this is why playing in person, I think, is so much better to playing online. Is you can get a better feel for the
Mhm.
experience that people are having, and you can get better just feedback from them, not necessarily vocal feedback, but you can see on their faces like when something didn't go well for them, when a rule annoyed them, and you can kind of just add that to the back of your mind and be like, okay, this kind of scenario isn't working for them. That particular rule didn't work for them. So
Mhm.
and so starts getting on their phone when we're looking up grappling rules. So let's simplify that and get the game moving. Some
Mhm.
people want to play with crunchy rules. Some people like looking through the rule book and being like, "Oh, I have an ability for that. Hang on." So, um, it all comes down to what a lot of people call the table.
Mhm.
And a lot of problems in Dungeons and Dragons and other tabletop RPGs, uh, almost 99% of the time, if somebody didn't have a good time, it's a table problem. It's not necessarily a game problem. It's sometimes a player or a DM problem, but
Mhm.
99% of the time, it's a table problem. It's the way that the group
Mhm.
interacted with that portion of the game.
Okay.
Um, so you have to go into the games realizing, and this is especially super important for beginners, we're all here to have fun. Um, don't stress over the rules so much. Go in, have fun. And the most important part is to communicate with the other players and the DM between sessions about what you enjoyed, what you didn't enjoy. If you're not spending like a third to half the time of the session itself afterwards
Mhm.
talking about the session, then you're probably could be doing something better as a group to elevate that experience. Um, the games that I run, most of the time afterwards, we talk about it for like a good hour or two afterwards. And we'll talk about it in our Discord later. And we'll tell stories about what happened to our other friends about how somebody got one shot by an electricity trap at the end of the hallway. Even
Mhm.
though he had successfully identified what triggered the trap, he didn't know what the trap was, set it off, and wound up dying, even though he knew there was a trap there.
Mhm.
So you can have you want to have those uh somebody at Bethesda referred to it as water cooler moments when they were talking about
Mm.
the design of Skyrim. You want to have moments that are unique to the
Mhm.
players that they can discuss and just enjoy the memory of. It's a storytelling experience. If you're not recounting that story later,
Mhm.
maybe adjust some things. Find the fun.
Makes sense.
It's a form of theater, really.
Mhm.
So, adjust the stage, adjust your characters.
Makes total sense. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
I've tried to, watch some people and like you watch on YouTube or Twitch or like that, and it's like these people are not having any fun at all. They're just kind of, running through the motions basically at that point. They're like, yeah, done this a
Yeah,
lot.
it really comes through with a lot of them where, um, their voices are kind of monotone, they
Hmm.
sound kind of bored, there's a lot of, "So, let's"
Yeah.
like, it feels like they were dragged there against their
Hmm.
will, and if you're feeling like that, then it can be fixed.
Hmm.
Maybe you don't like the system, maybe you don't like the setting. There's something about the story not dragging you in. But I do um believe like to my core that
Sure.
tabletop RPGs are
Mhm,
something that everybody can enjoy.
mhm. Definitely, yeah. I've like I said, been interested in a lot of them, and I think I honestly thought it was funny when they announced that the Dungeons and Dragons movie was coming, and
Mhm.
they're making a movie about it.
Well, they made another one.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't know about the first
There
one. That I seen the one with
there
Pine.
have been others. The
Yeah,
recent one with Chris Pine is
hmm
great.
that's what
Um,
I've heard.
let's not talk about the other ones.
Yeah, I've heard Pines is really good because he was actually apparently he was really involved with that when he was growing up. They said he was big into Dungeons and Dragons and stuff like that, so he was kind of understanding how everything went and
Mhm.
helped out a
Well,
lot.
the cast
Hmm
played Dungeons and Dragons together before, filming scenes,
hmm
and a lot of the stuff from their game
hmm
actually wound up kind of making its way into the movie, and I think that that was a great idea on the director's part, the Jonathans,
Yeah.
um, because it gave the actors an idea of the characters that they were playing, and it
hmm
also reminded everybody that we're having fun. Dumb stuff happens during D&D. You
hmm
just roll with it. Sometimes it's silly, sometimes it's heartfelt, but if you just roll with it, you're always gonna have a good time.
Right. Yep. I understand that. Yeah, I've I've had people it's weird. I don't know why, but somebody compared that like tabletop to the second Jumanji movie, where each character basically has a strength and a weakness for their character, and then there's certain they have to do certain things that can test their abilities, and if they don't do it
Oh,
right,
the
they can
new
die.
the
Yeah,
the new
yeah,
Jumanji movies. I
yeah,
was
yeah, yeah,
like, second all I could
yeah,
think of was Robin Williams' Jumanji. I forgot that there was a new
yeah,
series.
yeah. Kind of comparing, like they were like, this is kind of the
Mhm.
basic idea of. I'm like, oh, okay, I guess that makes sense. And then
It's kinda like that, yeah.
because yeah, but now you have obviously some probably DVDs that you've decided are best to start with if you're um beginner, like the one you were talking about a little bit ago,
Mhm.
the fantasy RPG.
Yeah.
Like, what about that one makes it? Yeah, the basic fantasy. I want to say Final Fantasy, and I was sitting there going, Final. It's not Final.
First of all, it's free. There is no cost to try this out. Second of all, the rules are
Mm.
super, super short. This book right here, this tiny book, this isn't even all rules. A good 70% of this
Mhm.
is spells and
Okay.
monsters. So the rules in this 165-page book
hmm It's pretty
are all
short.
explained in like 50 pages. So really only 50 pages of this is the
Wow.
actual rules. The rest of it is just reference for giant geckos. So on top of that, it has a great community around it. You can find them at basicfantasy.org.
Okay.
Yes. All the rules are free. You can download any of the rules on that website in PDF form, EPUB, whatever, for free. Print them out, redistribute them. It has its own license
Mhm.
now that just makes it m- primarily free for anybody to use. And then there's a lot of great content on the website, and it's a framework.
Okay.
Because the rules are so bare bones in this, it's very easy to make them modular. You can very easily homebrew in things that you want, homebrew out things that you don't like. Um, and it's all encouraged. And this
Mhm.
is based on an early 80s version of Dungeons and Dragons,
Okay.
which is referred to now as BX. It stands for the basic and expert rules of Dungeons and Dragons. It's based on it lightly. There's a couple of changes that I think make sense for modern players,
Okay.
because the early editions of Dungeons and Dragons had a lot of stuff that kind of leaked into them from wargaming, which is
Mhm.
how RPGs kind of came about was they were born of, well, what if we had a story for just these individual soldiers instead of whole armies against each other? What does the
Mm.
individual soldier think?
Okay.
um, so it's free, it's well supported. They have a very active Discord. The author Chris Gonerman is very active in the community. He's not on Discord too much, but he's very active in his forums. He's got
Mhm.
a YouTube channel where he talks about stuff. But the big thing about this is, if you do want the books, you
Mhm.
can get them printed at cost through Amazon. You can buy, like 6 to 8 copies of the rule book for your
Mhm.
entire table for the same cost of just the player's handbook for Dungeons and Dragons. So for me, a lot of it is a cost benefit thing, and a lot of it is that the rules are a framework. So a lot of it is left up to the dungeon master to decide what happens in a situation.
Okay.
Um, there's other rule systems, like this is another one that you can get for free for Golden Glory. You can also get it printed up on Lulu. It's by Justin Brown. But essentially, what it is this is Advanced Dungeons and Dragons second edition. And what Advanced Dungeons and Dragons was designed for tournament play. They used to actually have tournaments for Dungeons and Dragons where your party would be scored on treasure, monsters defeated, how much of the dungeon you explored within a time limit at conventions.
Okay.
So, because it was being played competitively, it needed very granular rules so that
Mhm.
every DM would judge a situation the same way.
Okay.
Um, so there's definitely room for those kinds of granular rules. And by the way, if you're familiar with the first two Baldur's Gate games,
Mhm.
that's this system is Advanced Dungeons and
Okay.
Dragons second edition.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, oh, go ahead.
I've actually wanted to get into Baldur's Gate games, but I haven't had a chance to yet.
Mhm. The first ones are they're very good.
Mhm.
The writing is really what holds them up more than the gameplay these
Mhm.
days. And unfortunately, I haven't gotten too far into the second one yet, but the first one, the first half of that game is a very slow burn,
Mhm.
but it's setting up a lot of stuff. And I have to say that I'm glad I stuck through it to the second half, because the stuff that starts coming to light in the second half based on everything you learn in the first half, some of it is chilling at times. There were points
Hmm.
in that game where like I got chills where I was like, "Oh, that's what's going on."
Right.
So it still holds up from a writing perspective. Gameplay wise,
Eh.
it's an early 90s computer game.
Yeah.
um what was the question?
Uh, wait. What? I guess like what do you were talking about the
Mhm.
best options and stuff like that,
The
like
best
what they.
options for like a new player.
Yeah.
Um, but truly, the best option is going to be whatever system the players around you are playing.
Okay.
If you have a local game store that has a D&D night that you can attend,
Mhm.
it's that system.
Okay.
And oftentimes, they can be very inviting to new players. I can't speak for every group, but the community as a whole
Mhm.
tends to be very inviting. And usually, so long as you don't just surprise them, and instead reach out to the DM or the store ahead of time and say, "Hey, I'm interested in joining this. I've never played before."
Mhm.
They tend to be very welcoming.
Mm.
And they can give you a quick crash course. And that is 100% the best part about being a player in D&D. You can show up without knowing any of the rules,
Mhm.
and they will be fed to you as you need to know them,
Okay.
because the primary driver is, what do you want your character to do?
Mhm.
So you can say like, "Oh, well, I wanna hit this goblin with my sword." You don't have to know mechanically how that works, because you are just standing there for the part of your player.
Mhm.
And the DM will then say, okay, you're going to roll a d20. You're going to add your attack bonus. You're going to add your strength bonus. Those are here, here, and here on your
Mhm.
character sheet. And you need to beat their armor class, which is a 12.
Okay.
So you roll it, you add the stuff up, and then the DM is like, hey, you hit them. Now you get to roll the damage that's listed for that sword. So the rules kind of get fed to you as you need them, and the relevant skills, it all starts to make sense very quickly from
Mhm.
a player's perspective. Don't get scared at this. If you're new to the game, don't get scared at this. This doesn't mean anything to
Mhm.
you as a player. What matters to you as a player is what you want your character to do, how they're responding to a situation. Let the DM deal with all that other crap. Now, if you don't have groups around you that are available and you can't seem to find one that's online, you may find yourself in the same position that I found myself when I was like 12. I
Mhm.
found this game. I'm interested in it. I want to play it. I'm going to have to be the one in charge. I'm going to have to be the dungeon master. I'm going to have to get the group together. It's actually really easy to do. I'm constantly surprised at how quickly people will jump to play D&D.
Mhm.
I've been playing for almost 30 years, and every decade, I have never had a problem finding players. I've had a problem finding players who show up on time, but I've
Mhm.
never had a problem finding players. um, so if you're brand new to the hobby and you want to run a game because
Mhm.
you don't know anybody who is running a game,
That's the best.
super this one, because you can read through the rules in an
Mhm.
afternoon, you can read through them a couple of times over a weekend, and then there's also Gonerman has another book that he put out. This one's not free, but it's very useful for new players. That's probably not. Oh, right here. This one here. The role playing game primer and old school rule book.
Oh.
This one's super cheap. I don't know where the PDF is available, but it's super short. And this is delightful because it walks you through how the
Mhm.
game is actually played with examples from games, from both the player and the DM perspective. So even if you've never played before, you've never watched it before on
Mhm.
Twitch or YouTube or anything, which God, y'all are spoiled these days.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, this does a great job of showing you what playing D&D is
Mhm.
actually like. And y before we had YouTube and Twitch and everything, it was very opaque.
Okay.
You'd have a rule book like this,
Mhm.
and you'd be reading about ability scores and things and, like, how combat works, but nothing that actually tells you how to play the game.
Mm.
The books were not written from a perspective of you've never done this before.
Mhm.
It kind of was like, okay, so you've been doing war gaming and now you want to do this, and you're like,
Yeah.
I haven't done that. I have no idea what's going on.
So what
These numbers mean nothing to me.
so what are some of the things that a beginner would need to actually like play? Like let's say you find a group, what are some things that a beginner should bring along or beginner should buy to kind of help themselves along with
So
learning?
if you are a player joining an active group,
Mhm.
they'll probably have everything that you need. Your
Okay.
DM will probably have player sheets for you. Bring pencil, bring pen, both, honestly. Um, bring some graph paper. That's going to be very DM dependent. But I definitely suggest bringing some graph paper regardless, some scrap paper just for taking notes, because there's
Mm.
going to be times where you're like, oh, I feel like I should remember that. Like you're playing an older video game that doesn't necessarily have a quest log or something. So you're like writing shit down all the time.
Mhm.
Notepad and some writing stuff, and you're
Mhm.
probably fine. Your group 100%. will already have the funny looking dice. Um,
Okay.
so if you don't have these, somebody in your group probably has these. If you're going to be DMing for a group that's never played before, you're going to need to get a set of these. They are so cheap these
Okay.
days. Um, and most starter sets for the larger, more popular games are going to come with a set of dice, anyways. If you're going to be jumping into Dungeons and Dragons, because it's a very well supported game,
Yeah.
um, and you don't mind that their rule books are like $60 a pop and are 90% art. Again, it's a good system, just kind of expensive sometimes to buy everything that you might want.
Yeah.
um, you can get they have a wonderful starter set, and it's usually on sale. Their starter sets are great.
Hmm.
They've got the regular Dungeons and Dragons starter set, which comes with the Lost Mines of Phandelver adventure, which is a great, great starter adventure. I've gotten to play some of that one with some friends. That's really most of the fifth edition I've played was Lost Mines of Phandelver. So you've got the different D&D starter sets, the Essentials kit, Dragons of Stormwreck Isle is another starter set. All of those come with character sheets, pre-built characters, so you don't even have to
Mm.
worry about character generation. You can just jump right in without worrying about all the rules that goes into character creation, which
Mhm.
to me, character creation is one of the most fun parts. But when you're learning the game, it's nice to just be handed a character and you don't have to come up with anything. You can be like, you're playing this dwarf. He's angry because his brother went missing. These are
Mm.
the things he likes. These are the things he doesn't like. This is his personality. And you're like, oh, great. I know what I'm doing.
That's easy enough.
Uh, yeah, and it comes with dice. It comes with very useful guides
Mhm.
for the dungeon masters and the players, kind of an explanation of different things. So uh, D&D, as much as I give it grief for a lot of things, mostly money, um, very well supported, great way to get started in the hobby. And like 9 out of 10 groups that you find
Mhm.
who are doing RPGs are probably playing fifth edition.
Okay.
So it's a good, consistent way to find players and DMs and get
Mhm.
into the game. Um, and it really has had a massive boom since the different podcasts. The pandemic did amazing things for
Yeah.
RPGs, and Stranger Things did a lot for it. So it's been heavily popularized lately, and for the most part, very deserving of it. It's a great game, and it shares the same DNA as this. Most of what you learn in this is still
Mhm.
going to be completely relevant in fifth edition. This just has less crunch to it. Fifth edition has like skills and proficiencies and things for your characters. This one doesn't really do that. You can,
Mhm.
again, you can create a character in 5 minutes in this because you don't worry about backgrounds and stuff. But in fifth edition, that lends itself more to building out a character with personality and something to
Mhm.
tell a story. This really shines where the adventure itself is the story. Um, Fifth edition is good for, oh well, I'm a hero who's already done these great deeds, and you already have this idea for this, strong, confident character. And in this one, you're a scared guy who has a maximum of 2 hit points and is probably not going to survive the first half hour.
I
Which
got it.
they both lead to different experiences.
Mm.
Um, and it really depends on the kind of game that you're looking for. But again, like if you're brand new to the game and you don't want to worry about learning a lot of rules,
That's the
or
option.
you don't want to spend any money.
Mhm. That makes sense. Now,
Yeah.
you showed a second ago, like all the dice. Is there different dice for different things, or is it kind of all
So the main one, and this is strictly speaking within the realm of Dungeons and Dragons and its
okay?
clones. The big one is the D20. This is the one that you'll see on a lot of merch because this is the most important one. This is what is used for all of your skill rolls and everything. You'll do this for your checks. You roll this to see if you hit a monster. You roll this to see if you survive the trap. This one gets used a lot, but truly, when you go out to buy your dice, and you can get these for so stinking cheap. If you're paying more than $5 for your dice, you're paying too much, or you like really fancy dice.
Mm,
And
mm.
that's fine. A lot of people, a lot of players get into collecting dice. It's weird. I don't have to get into collecting dice because I keep getting them as gifts. I really like this set of dice. This set was actually surprisingly expensive. This is like a $30 set. Um, but that's because these are specially cast
Okay.
to not only look like the older dice, but they also have very sharp edges, and they are one material the whole way through so that they roll as randomly as they can. A lot of the fancier dice, to some degree, they're not going to be quite as random because
Mhm.
you get different materials in them and different pigments, and they all weigh different amounts. So I do
Mm.
have some fancy dice here. These were a gift to me from one
Wow.
of my players. These are the Guilds of Ravnica, which, if you've played Magic the Gathering, Ravnica is a setting in Magic the Gathering, and now also a setting in Dungeons and Dragons. And he got me this great set of
Wow.
dice as a gift,
Yeah.
complete with this massive
This
D10.
thing is big.
So yeah, you can get fancy with them. You don't have to get fancy with them.
Mhm.
For your first set of dice, $5, maybe cheaper.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, I've seen some people like I went to a few of those I forget what they're called, like little stores where they sell like collectibles like Dragon Ball Z characters, Big O characters, stuff like that, and they always have
Mhm.
Dungeons Dragons back there and you see like the guy that comes in with like four dice full of bags or full of dice is like, "What in the world?"
There's a lot of people who like collecting dice.
Mhm.
Um, the best ones I've seen are the full metal ones that are like sculpted. They're
Yeah.
beautiful. I'm not gonna buy them, but yeah, they're beautiful.
Yeah, like, "No, thank you." Do you feel like if your dice isn't like I guess made out of the same material that's kind of a cheating kind of like where it's where it's gonna hit on each time, or do you feel like it doesn't really matter at that point?
There's a lot of discussion around that. Personally, I don't stress about it too much because I don't really have any players who bring out like, a certain dice and always make their rolls.
Mhm,
Dice jail
mhm,
is a very real thing. Um, Everybody occasionally is going to get betrayed by their favorite dice. I
mhm,
have certain dice that seem to roll very well against players,
mhm,
but terribly for me. So there's there's some hilarious videos out there about like dice personalities and finding out what kind of personalities your dice have. Um, and personally, I think most of it is part of the fun.
mhm.
It's a very social game. Really, only twice in 30 years of playing have I had a player that I was like, "You're cheating.
Yeah.
You're objectively cheating," and not like subtle stuff. Like he wasn't using weighted dice.
Mhm.
He would roll and then like wait for me to be glancing somewhere else and he would change the roll. So I've never had a situation with weighted dice.
Okay.
Maybe those people are out there. um in D&D, I
Mhm.
don't know why you would cheat at D&D. It's a social game that you're playing for fun. It's not competitive unless you're playing at a tournament, in which case your dice are probably being provided to you anyways.
Right.
So I just don't see the draw of it. I
Mhm.
Maybe that's just my personality, I don't know.
See, it just seems odd to me that like what you were saying about the dice, like the more expensive ones have, more of a or less random in them. It just seems odd that
So
when
yeah, uh,
buying like, more expensive would be less
mhm.
random. Like, huh?
Yeah, and there can be some stuff with that. Like the a lot of the dice are cast with um epoxy resin,
Okay.
and you'll get different ones with like glitter and stuff. And it's usually a very negligible amount.
Hmm.
Like I don't think this die, even though it's got um, two very different kinds of epoxy resin that it was cast out of, and they've got a nice pattern and they look really cool. But if I was to put this in a saltwater bath where it floats, I'm pretty sure it would be weighted to one side. If I were to just test this 100 times on my
Hmm.
own, it would probably be very close to perfectly normally random. So I wouldn't accuse somebody of using something like this as using a weighted die.
Hmm.
For me, it's more of just the look to
Hmm.
these. Um, it's nostalgic. I
Yeah.
love that they're more random. I love that the edges are really sharp.
Hmm.
I like the sound that they make when I roll them. Um, so a lot of it just comes down to preference.
Hmm. I understand that. Now, do you oh, I forgot what that's now. Do you see d I guess would you be able to tell if somebody had a weighted dice, I guess, in a way? Like would it just kinda or it'd be
Now,
kinda guesstimate?
now they would have to roll very consistently with the same dice the entire time. And most of my players, um, half of my players always play with the same set of dice,
Mhm.
and they seem to be, you know, perfectly random. And then I've got a couple of other players who have a large collection of dice and they'll like break out different dice depending on the occasion. And I've seen them succeed and I've seen them fail. Again, like only twice, and this was back in like middle school,
Mhm.
did I ever run into a situation where somebody was fudging their rolls.
Makes sense.
As far as a weighted die is concerned, I've heard stories about them. I've never seen a die where I'm like, "That's weighted."
Yeah.
Uh, there's been points where I've been like, "You can't use that die anymore. Put that away." But it's always in, like, good fun because they get,
Mhm.
like, straight back-to-back 20s. I'm like,
So
"Roll this one." And then everybody at the table has a laugh. But that's also, down to, the sense of the table.
that was different.
He has the zoomies right now. He's
Yeah.
been bolting around on the floor. It's very distracting.
So what's it?
So it comes down to like table personalities.
Mhm.
Um, I make it a general rule to only play with pretty chill people. If somebody's taking the game too seriously, I don't want to play with them. And I'll
Makes sense.
politely ask them to leave the group and just let them know, like, you're just not a good
Yeah.
personality fit with the rest of the group. And that is the trickiest. That is the hard part. That is the only really hard part about playing tabletop RPGs is
Mhm.
when you have a player that doesn't jibe well with the rest of the group
Mhm.
and you're like, I have to be the bad guy and get rid of this person, and they're perfectly fine otherwise, but they're not
Yeah.
good in the D&D group, and they're making everybody else not wanna play."
Yeah. Now
And, that's why I make it a point to also be critical of myself because the last game I played in, I removed myself from the group because I was like,
mm.
"I'm gonna be that guy. I should leave."
Understandable. Now, with dice, can you end up like let's say you have like 6 dice that you bring with you, dice packs, I guess. Could you
Mhm.
change your dice mid game? Like, let's say your one dice is not giving you d20s like at all, and you're like, man, I just can't
Oh,
play with
yeah.
this dice. And okay.
Yeah. That's totally what Dice Jail is. It's a meme that started forever ago, but you can even get like little 3D printed dice jails on
Hmm.
Etsy for when like a die has failed you too many times. And you're like, I'm not using you anymore. You're going to dice jail, and then you'll bust out another one.
Okay.
Unless you're playing with like a very serious group, or you're playing in like some kind of organized tournament play
Hmm.
that probably supplies you dice anyways to use to just avoid that.
Right.
Um, yeah, it's not a problem.
Okay.
One of my players has just it's like a bucket of dice. So I'm like, roll me a d20, and he's got like 30 options to go through,
Yeah.
and he'll decide he likes this one for that roll, and it's
Hmm.
fine. It's funny every time it happens.
So, you did say earlier that there are different types of characters that you can be.
Mhm.
Now, let's say you're building a character for the first time as a beginner. What's like the best option would you say for a character to be first time up?
Oh man, that's totally come so if you're jumping into the game and you want to
Mhm.
build your own character, usually it's best to look at like classical fantasy and be like, I really like Gimli.
Okay.
I want to be Gimli, Dwarven fighter.
Mhm.
You're going to be building a Dwarven fighter. If you want to be like Aragorn, you're making a half elf ranger.
Okay.
So having some previous interest in fantasy literature can really help your DM to help you figure out what kind of character you want to play. For a lot of games with more complex and in-depth character creation, like D&D 5th edition, um, it's often good for DMs to do what's called a session zero, where you either do it with the entire group at once, and not only do you work through character creation with everyone, and you don't even play that night, you
Mhm.
just do your character creation, you talk about what the game is going to be like, and it's great. Session zeros are a wonderful thing because it sets an expectation for
Okay.
everybody, and everybody has the same expectation at the end of it. If you start DMing without doing a session zero, without talking about what the game is going to be like ahead of time, your players are all going to be coming in with very different expectations of how the
Mhm.
game is going to run. And it's easy to forget to do. I forget to do session zeros all the time, but I also have something that character creation is done in 5 minutes. Um,
Yeah.
but with the more in-depth character creations where you can spend, like an hour creating your character, or a goddamn week creating your character. Session zeros are incredibly helpful to sit down with the table or even players individually and
Mhm.
work with them on their characters. And then the DM also has a really, really good idea of where that character is and what the player thinks of their character and how they're hoping to play it.
Mm.
I think that a really common mistake, and I know it works for some groups, especially if it's a group that you're used to playing with. Hi,
Mhm.
Tate. I don't want you in my lap right now. um, he's so old. He's like a 20-year
Aw.
old Maine Coon,
Oh yeah.
and that means that he puts his claws in me all the time to make sure he doesn't fall over, which is
He's
fine
strong.
when I'm wearing jeans.
Yeah. Understandable.
um, So I think a common mistake that a lot of newer DMs will make, with a fresh group or people that you haven't played with before is, they'll ask players who already know how to play
Mhm.
to make their characters ahead of time and then show up with the
Mm.
characters before
Okay.
verifying them. And you get all sorts of weird stuff showing up that doesn't necessarily fit the
S
setting that you're playing in.
Hmm.
You're playing some like low Conan the Barbarian fantasy, and they brought a Jedi. It's you can get some weird stuff if you don't do a session zero and say, this is what the setting is going to be.
Uh-huh.
This is what I'm limiting your character creation to. Let's work on our characters. Tell me what you're hoping to play. Um, and that I think is the best way to approach modern character creation.
Hmm.
For me personally, I run BFRPG almost more like a roguelike that
Okay.
has room for theater. So again, 5-minute character creation and you're off and running. Your characters don't need a background because this is their first adventure. This is
Hmm.
going to be their background if they survive. And I really prefer just doing random character generation. You
Right.
roll your stats straight down, see what you can make a character out of those stats, and then you go. And with the right player group, you can sometimes get more creativity out
Hmm.
of that. And I've seen it work very well with both players who have more experience and also players who have less experience because sometimes too much choice
Hmm.
removes choice. So you have somebody coming into a game and they know what kind of character they want. I think it's very good for a DM to say, okay, we're going to be creating our characters for this. And then you kind of set them up more for success because this is something that they're already attached to. Fifth
Hmm.
edition does this very well because it's harder to die in fifth edition. So it's
Okay.
easier to have a character with a longer story and a longer personal plot line as
Hmm.
opposed to something like BFRPG or other games that are OSR or old school rules, old school Renaissance, old school revival, the old school style of gaming, where um, with random character generation, and you can still do it with the modern ones, but
Hmm.
with random character generation, they might not know what they want to be.
Right.
They're like, I don't know if I want to be a fighter. I don't know if I want to be a thief. I don't know what I'm doing.
Hmm.
Tell me what I'm doing. And I can just be like,
Help me.
roll these 3 dice,
Hmm.
write down the total number that you get. Do that for me 6 times.
Oh, that's easy enough.
That is your starting stat block. With these stats, you can be a human, a dwarf, or a halfling.
Okay.
And they're like, cool, I'll be a halfling. Great. You can be a fighter, you can be a rogue. And they're like, what's the difference? Fighter hit with sword, rogue dies if gets into combat, but can find traps. And they're like,
Mm.
great, I'll be a rogue. So it depends on the group.
Hmm.
Um, I have had success with both kinds of games. I've run both kinds of games. I really prefer this kind of game right now.
Hmm.
But with like my BattleTech game, I've been running this one now for a couple of, oh my God, almost a year. Um, well, we only meet like twice a month and there have been interruptions. So when I say
Yeah.
almost a year, I mean like 7 sessions, maybe 10.
7.
Um, but it's also much more of a drama. It's not a dungeon delve. It's more of a space opera. So
Mhm.
they're two very different kinds of games that I've been running. And it depends on the kind of game that you want to run because you could do just a straightforward dungeon crawl, darkest dungeon. Your characters are dying every session or two,
Mhm.
or you can do something with an epic narrative where you've got characters who are seeking revenge or trying to find a lost family member, and you can weave it into this epic tale that everyone's kind of involved with.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, I know, I know this is, like, just hitting the tip of the iceberg right now. I mean, there's a lot that I would guess you have to learn from actually playing the game, but, this definitely helps out me personally. I mean, learning all this little bit of stuff that at least get me into the game and then, teaching myself later on too, so.
I, I'm sure it always sounds so large
Mhm.
and vague, hearing about it because you're like, "This is a game?
Yeah.
How do I
Mhm.
do this game?" Um, and it's just once you get into the headspace that it is a group storytelling experiment where you
Mhm.
occasionally roll dice to see whether or not you did a thing successfully, it all just kind of flows together and makes sense.
Mhm. Yeah, that's definitely something that I'm excited. I want to try out and learn. Everything like that. So definitely something I'm looking to in the future. I do want to thank you for
Yeah.
tonight for doing all this. I know we've talked a lot about a lot of things tonight. So if anybody has any questions, is there anywhere you can like point them to and like D&D type stuff or like tabletop or I put like in the I guess in the little.
So the various subreddits are great resources. If you want to see actual play,
Mhm.
there's the some great stuff out there like you mentioned with Matthew Lillard, um, and Brendan Lee Mulligan and Matt Mercer. I cannot Dimension 20 is Brendan Lee Mulligan's.
Okay.
Um, he cracks me up. Um, I actually try to not watch too many live plays of
Mhm.
D&D. Get down. um, because there's something that's called the Mercer effect,
Okay.
where Matt Mercer is a spectacular dungeon master, but he's also like a professional voice actor,
Mm.
and he is he's a trained actor.
Mhm.
So he is very, very good at getting into the character of every single NPC that he plays. And he's playing with a group of professional actors. So there's something that's called the Mercer effect, where you have people who haven't played D&D before, they haven't been playing much D&D,
Mhm.
where they watch these live plays and they get an expectation that that's
Mhm.
how it's supposed to go, and it does like one of two things. Once they build that expectation, they either think, "Oh, there's no way I could possibly do this.
Mhm.
I can't do that. I can't just come up with a character on the spot. I can't act on the
Yeah.
spot. I can't do improv," and then they shy away from it. Or two, the DMs are like, "I have to be that guy.
Yeah.
I have to DM that way because he's really good at it." And everybody has their own slightly different ways of playing, and that
Mhm.
can vary one way to another. I rarely get into character. I almost never do voices.
Mhm.
My players like how I run my games fine, and that is
Mhm.
all I need. It lets me to focus on other aspects of the DM's craft.
Mhm.
Some people are just naturally good at that. My wife, Shannon, people on my channel know her as Perry Onan. She has run Call of Cthulhu for us
Okay.
a couple of times as a keeper. She is really good at dropping into improv and putting on a character and playing that character during the interaction with them.
Mhm.
So that's her style, and she's very natural at it. And I think finding that natural style is
Helps out.
always going to be what works best. So if you want to see what D&D is like,
Mhm.
absolutely watch these. They can be fun. Just don't make an expectation that every table is going to be like that, because
Mhm.
there are very few tables that are like that. In fact, you're probably watching the only tables that are like that.
Yeah.
But the actual experience, what you're feeling inside, what's going on in your head, is close to what they are performing. You
Mhm.
know, in your mind, you have this scene where your characters are dealing with this villain, or they're trying to survive this room that has a death trap that's going to kill them all in 5 minutes. The imagination does so much to lift this game up,
Hmm.
this entire hobby up. You don't need the miniatures, you don't need the maps, you don't need the great set pieces, you don't need the voices. What you need is you need a good group
Hmm.
and a desire to enjoy playing the game. And that makes it all come together. So,
Well, that's a lot of information to go through that I've learned. So thank you again.
yeah.
Yeah, just definitely something that I want to do in the future. Definitely want to have you back on the podcast pretty soon. Going to talk
Mhm.
about actually I was thinking about books with you one of these nights, kind of
Ooh,
our favorite
books.
authors, stuff like that. So
Mhm.
I thought that'd be kind of cool, and get a little deeper in some other stuff that we aren't, video games, stuff like that. So I definitely want to have you on again. But if there you want to follow Saigan, he does stream on Twitch a lot, YouTube.
A lot is generous. It's not much these days.
Yeah, it'll be better.
But
It'll get back.
I am active in my Discord, and,
Yep.
we might see a bunch more streams once Dragon Quest Monsters: The Dark Prince
Yeah.
comes out. So
Yep. I forgot about that. Yeah. And then like when he sets up the Dungeons and Dragons, tabletop, I'll actually be able to record. I'll record it on Twitch, and you'll be able to watch it live. So if you want to see that, it'll be probably on Soccer FW5 on Twitch. So Um, thank you again, Sagan. Is there anything that else that you want me to shout out for you?
no, no, that's pretty much it. If you wanna go the, Dungeons& and Dragons route, which is, nice and supported and the easiest to find an active group in,
Hmm.
I would check out one of the essentials kits. You can find them usually between 10 or $20,
Okay.
on sale. I do If you do have a local game store,
Hmm.
wonderful resources. Always try and support your local game stores because they oftentimes provide that play space that
Hmm.
people go to play. Not everyone has a basement that they can play in, or a big dining room table that they can have,
Yeah.
8 people in. If you've got a small apartment, it might not be feasible. If you've got a bunch of roommates who aren't interested, or you're living at home, which
Hmm.
in this economy,
Understandable.
God, you're probably saving a lot of money.
Yeah.
um, yeah, your local game stores, most of them provide play space, usually for free. So it's really important that we continue to support them.
Definitely.
Can you get the essentials kit for $12 on Amazon? Yes.
Hmm.
Could you get it for $20 at the store that lets you play for free every week for hours on end at their location and use their space? Also, yes, and I would
Yeah.
say give them the money.
Understandable.
Um, yeah, so local game stores, if you're strapped for cash and you don't want to invest in, um, rule books and a starter set and everything,
Pick
it's
that
free.
up.
It's free.
Yeah. So
Free.
best way. Yeah.
So, and you know what? If you decide you didn't like it, it
It's
was
free.
free.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for being on this episode. I want to thank all my viewers. Seeing you, a lot of you, popping in, subscribing, stuff like that. So thank you all. And thank you, Sagan, again. And have to do this again pretty soon.
Yeah, you're welcome. Glad to be here. Looking forward to the next time.
Yeah. Thank you all for watching and have a great night.